a few questions about your very beginnings as a musician.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that you quite like the Mills Brothers.
Well, first of all, my parents had a collection of 78s, and they had a hi-fi with current vinyl, but I like to play the old-fashioned one, so I would just pick one out and play it, and the only one that really struck me was the Mills Brothers, and I think it was the first time I heard multiple harmonies that was so beautiful, and I learned this song, The Window Washer Man. I just would play it over and over. I could almost sing it to you now, it's because it just stuck with me. It's just a little, it's like one of those sort of light songs that could never be offensive to anyone. It was like Joe the Window Washer Man, and it's like, Joe, how are you? I guess I am okay. Joe, what you do? I rub all day. How does it feel? It's that kind of very light, lovely, but it was the harmonies that I loved. It wasn't so much that this is a great song, but it was very catchy, and yeah.
That's always something that fascinates me, how people get involved with music for the first time. So this is something I'm really curious about when I talk to people.
Right.
And
I was probably maybe 10 or 11 when I was doing that. I wasn't a little kid, but there was always music playing in my house. My parents loved classical music. My mother was a really, really good pianist and had a beautiful Steinway, so it sounded great. And we all took piano lessons. I don't like being taught, so I retired at age 11. So, but both my sisters still play. They play duets together now, So, yeah. So there was always, and my father really loved opera, and Maria Callas, Kathleen Ferrier. I didn't really relate to that kind of singing so much, but then I had these 78s I could explore. The other one I used to play a lot, which is not. There is music. It's Prokofiev, I think, Peter and the Wolf, and which has got that lovely story to it, but I was younger then when I was doing that. But I know my father said that when I was 2.5, I was humming Greensleeves. I always connected to music, from a young age.
That's something a lot of people, including myself, love about your voice. And I know that there must have been a teacher or some people who discouraged your singing.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
But there must have come a point when somebody said to you, hey, you got a really lovely voice.
Well, I remember being at school, and so my voice has always been naturally lower, and obviously when I was younger I could reach notes, but it didn't feel natural. It felt like, okay, I have to hit that whatever note everybody else was singing. So we had singing class, right, in this, so my what you would call high school, we're all in this hall which is wooden, so the acoustics are great, and it's like we're singing this song, and I'm going like, well, I'm just going to sing harmony because that's where my comfort is. Who's doing that awful noise? And I said, it's me. Well, don't sing. I said, fine, I'm not going to sing. So, but it didn't stop me. I just thought she was not a thoughtful teacher, let's put it that way. And it's like, it didn't make me feel like, it was just like, okay, I have permission not to have to try to reach for notes. I don't feel comfortable trying to reach, but I don't think I really thought about, what I've never taken singing lessons, so it just is how I sing. And now people tell me about my voice, and maybe, for 20, 30 years they have. I'm trying to remember at the beginning, though, if anyone ever said that, really. I suppose the first person actually is when I did John Peel's Night Ride show, and he invited me to the show at the BBC, and he was listening for the first time. So what happens with the BBC, you have to pass an audition, and then it can be played. So it had already been recorded, but he hadn't heard it, and then it went before this board of old men who decided who was okay and who wasn't. And so anyway, I'm listening with him, and he was like, it's actually on one of the BBC recordings, like, wow, with Buffy St. Marie, you're my favorite lady singer. And it was like, I think that was the first time maybe that I felt someone had actually said expressed that to me. I mean, people said they liked my music, my songs, but I don't remember so much about my actual voice back then. And when I listen to the first albums, I'm clearly so much younger. Well, I mean, naturally in age I am, but in sound too. It's sort of it's everything I sang back then was faster, it seems, than how I sing now. And I think I wasn't able to. I don't think at that age I had the maturity to just be inside a song. It was singing it, but now I feel like I am inside the songs I'm singing. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think how I sing has a lot more depth now than it did when I was younger. But I think that's just life and experience. I think whatever your experiences are, and obviously the longer you live, the more experiences you have, it comes through in your voice, I mean, I listen to Joni Mitchell now, and her voice is way lower than it was, and it's so interesting. I think it's pretty similar if you listen to her first album and my first album. I mean, she could sing so high. I was never like that, but in just the contrast, I think, is similar,
You also talked about this, that you were quite lucky in having known people who had the right connections, like Pete Roach had something to do with John Peel, and maybe you could talk a little bit how these connections worked. And to me it seemed there wasn't a lot of competitiveness between the artists, John Martyn, Nick Drake, Al Stewart, and all the people. Am I mistaken?
Okay, so that's several questions.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. So I'll go back to the beginning. So I went to Sheffield University, and I had done theatre at school, and I really liked it. So I went one day. I knocked on the theatre group door, and that was like, oh, okay, I feel very comfortable here. And it's actually where I had just got my guitar maybe 3 months before, so I really was learning to play, very much learning to play. But some people there knew how to play, so I could bring my guitar in there and just try things out. And I'd try doing a Bob Dylan song, and they'd go, "Bridget, you got the chords all wrong." And I go, "Well, I don't know." And so anyway, it was very comfortable. And some of those people knew some of the Liverpool scene poets, like Adrian Henry, and Jeff Hill was one of the poets there, Mitch Howard, and who else? And then Pete Roach came. I mean, he wasn't. They would come and visit. It wasn't like they were sort of like visiting friends at the theatre group, not actually at the college. And so that's how I got to know Pete Roach. And then when I came down to London in June of '68, he was already involved with John Peel's Night Ride, in the sense of John wanted to have poets on, so Pete would say, "Well, why don't you get so and so or so and so?" So that's his connection with John. And then he suggested that I make a tape, and I had already met John Martyn in 1967, so John knew Al Stewart, so he said, "Well, I've arranged for you to go to Al's house because he has a Revox," and so that's where my first demo was made, which is the one that was sent to the BBC via Pete Roach. So all those connections happened like that. So in terms of competitiveness, I think at the beginning I would absolutely say probably not, but I think I mean, for me there weren't that many lady singers, as we were called, and certainly, I mean, I wasn't in the folk scene, and I think that was quite competitive, actually. I know that there was a Cornish singer, Brenda Wootton, who Michael Chapman knew really well, and later on, so maybe in, I don't know, sometime in the 70s, he said, and I wouldn't have fit into this traditional folk scene, but Brenda Wootton never wanted other lady singers there. It was like, I am queen of my domain, which is fair enough, So, but I think there was some, but certainly I didn't really feel it, because there were so few. It was almost like Claire Hamill was someone who was singing, and I was just interested to hear them. I bought their albums, and Jackie Whitron was another one. Joanne Kelly, I loved her, but she died so young. And who else? Sandy Denny, obviously, and Judy Dybel. I met probably in the mid-70s. No, maybe early 70s, I think. But I didn't actually hear her singing, because I think she started with the Straubs. Was it the Straubs or Fairport? Fairport, before Sandy did, yeah. So, and then there was Doris Henderson, who was with Trevor Lucas in Eclection, I think that was her band. But it's not, I didn't come across that many lady singers. So for me, it was interesting to hear them rather than, oh, this is my I never thought of anyone as my competition. And certainly in terms of playing guitar, I never felt I was a great guitarist. I was always like, and mostly it was guys I was watching and learning from, or trying to figure out something from. And I think there might have been some competition between some of the male guitarists, but obviously I wasn't involved with that, so I shouldn't speak to it really.
Still, I'd like to say that to me it seems like a very steep learning curve. When I read about your first gig at Les Cousins in the summer of '68, and you only started writing songs approximately a year before that.
So I got my guitar, I left school in '65, and that summer I can remember it took me 3 months just to learn how to change from G to C to D and back again. It was just like lifting your hand off and trying to remember. So all of that was, and then I went to university. And so, but at university, I guess within the first year, the theatre group did reviews in the sense of, it's like a variety show, maybe a scene or something. And then they would say, well, Bridget, why don't you sing a song? So I did start actually doing sort of performance. I mean, it's just one song. I had no idea what a gig was, it was just, but I'm able to sing a song. And then later on, when I had more, so a little side story from that is that one of these reviews, there was the guy who ran the Rotherham Folk Club, which was, I don't know, maybe 10 miles from Sheffield, heard me sing, and he said, oh, I'd love you to come and sing at my folk club. I said, okay. I still kept the pencil written note that he wrote me, and so I sang the 4 songs that I knew. That's all I knew. I didn't know what a gig was. And he said, that's it? And I said, that's all I know, So, and then I felt terrible, because obviously I'd let him down, but I still didn't know what a gig was, But I would say within the last year, I was playing, they had halls of residence, and each hall would put on a hall ball, and I would be paid very little, which is fine, but to sit in the quiet room, which is really where people were so exhausted from dancing, just to play, not really perform in the sense of a set list or anything, just be playing. But that was really good experience, because it was learning that everybody doesn't have to shut up and be quiet when you're playing, and you can't take it personally because they didn't come to hear you; they came to sit in the quiet room. So it was a good learning thing. But that's my experience before Cousins. So actually playing Cousins was pretty terrifying, because there was an audience that came to hear people. And in Cousins, you were like, 2 feet away from, it was it was a raised stage, but very small, and people were right up against you, and it was just terrifying. I don't remember what I played, but I can remember the feeling of like, oh my goodness, this is really scary, but I didn't want not to do it.
Is it correct that they didn't have microphones?
No, they did. They had a guitar mic, because we had to use things like Barker's berries that you attach. I still have my old one, and that you'd attach to your guitar, but they used a guitar mic and a vocal mic. But they didn't have a sound system per se, not like now where you can say, oh, could you turn the bass up? Could you do this? I want a little reverb. It wasn't like that. It was just sort of amplification.
One point in your career where you must have realized, I can make a living out of playing music.
Oh, I told my parents, this is what I want to do. And my father said, how are you going to make money? And I said, I don't know, but I will. And I absolutely remember that conversation. I mean, I think he was a doctor who came from nothing. So he was born just before World War One, and in World War One, his father died. His father died when he was 2 years old, and both his parents were in the Salvation Army. So it was, in the World War One, his mother and his sister and he were moved over to Canada. So he went to, I think, 13 schools before he left school at 16. So, and at 16 he apprenticed with an optometrist, and then realized that he was really fascinated with eyes, and then he didn't graduate as a doctor until his 30s. So he had a really long road to, making it. And so I think in his mind it was like, oh my God, how is she ever going to make money? Because I didn't know much about the music business either, but he knew nothing. But I just said, I'm going to do it. So I did live at home with them for, let's see, so 68, probably till 71, something like that. But I gave them 10% of whatever I made, and that was my rent, I mean, they didn't need the money, but it was to, and for me to just feel like, well, I'm doing what I can, But I was just very lucky to have had that tape made, to have that tape taken to John Peel, and have John Peel love me. It's just like my music he loved. And so about a week later I did a TV show. It was like, oh my goodness, it was called How It Is, and I just sang one song, but it was amazing. And then he took me on his DJ gigs, so he actually taught me a lot about performing, and he said, Bridget, you're only going to play half an hour, you always leave people wanting more. And it's like, not that I go up on stage now saying that, but then it was sort of important to just hear that it's okay not to feel you have to play everything you just, and I suppose that was probably, I don't remember really making set lists so much, but I must have done it. But anyway, he taught me a lot and helped me so much,
Do you still feel you get a whiff of the times that they were composed in, and you can reconnect to the person you were when you wrote them?
I don't think that's what I do. I think I reinterpret my own work, Autumn Lullaby that I sang last night was different because of Emily's beautiful pizzicato, but also I am now visualizing. We have this cabin in the Adirondacks, which is off grid, just in the middle of 12 acres of old wood, and lake surrounding it, and that's where I am, when I'm sort of feeling autumn is there. I'm not back in my garden in Fife Road in East Sheen in London, which is presumably, I don't, my songs are sort of, I don't sit down and write a song. It's like it's coming through me. So I think, the Autumn Lullaby was probably an amalgam of Richmond Park and my garden and the Sheen Common that was near our house. But I can only say that in retrospect. I don't honestly remember the impetus for it,
You mentioned a certain place that you have somewhere in the woods, but I didn't get it.
We have this off-grid cabin, and it's in the Adirondacks, which is a 6 million acre national park in New York State. And the Atkinson family owned 1,000 acres of that. And back in the 70s, my husband, Gordon Edwards, bought 1.25 acres of that 1,000 acres, and the Fred Atkinson built a cabin there for him. Like, it was pretty. That cabin ultimately burnt down in '98, and that was pretty basic. But then we rebuilt it, and in rebuilding, sort of made it more of. It's still a cabin, but it's more homey. It actually has a bedroom, and before the bed was in the living room, which was the only room, and it's a little more comfortable now. So it's about a 6-hour drive from New York City, and it's really in the middle of nowhere. It's really beautiful and very, very peaceful. It's off-grid, so I don't have cell service there. I can't get internet, and I could if I paid thousands of dollars, but I'm not interested, because I just like being, around what I feel most comfortable in, which is listening to the world around me rather than traffic or other people talking on their phones incessantly now. It's like everywhere you go, nobody cares what you hear, what they say, and I'm just removed from all of that. It's really beautiful.
So it's some kind of haven.
Yeah, it's very peaceful. It's definitely, it's a thinking place, you know what I mean? It's very still.
Wonderful. That's wonderful to have.
Yes, it is. I mean, and that's because Gordon took a shot. I think he paid $10,000, you know, for a cabin and a little piece of land. And he didn't go there for the first 10 years because he's a bass player. He was on the road all the time. And then he started going a bit. And then when we got, I mean, I've known him since 79, but we actually got together in 95. And he said something about, I've waited for you to come back from England because I want to take you to the cabin. So that was my first experience, but it was like, wow, this is amazing. Yeah.
You talked about that songs enter you, and can you give one example?
Well, actually, I can tell you about the most recent thing. So I actually damaged my hand. And the good thing is that when I play, it doesn't have to straighten. I can't actually straighten this hand. But when I damaged it, my fingers were like this. And then, anyway, at that time, I thought, I'm not going to be able to play again. But anyway, it's fine. But I didn't play guitar for maybe 3 weeks. And then when I said, I'm going to pick it up today. So I did. And this song just came. I mean, I can't explain it. It's just there. And I'm still working on it. This is like 3 weeks ago or something. But it was like, oh, wow, thank you, you know. And then there are other songs that I have beginnings of. And then I do have to work more at them, obviously, because I can't necessarily stay in that space where the song started, you know, so I have to wait for that feeling again. And sometimes I find in New York, if I'm on the subway, it's actually a really creative time for me, and it just I'm able to sort of get back into where the beginning of the song was, you know. I mean, I just look at it as gifts, really. And I write, you know, I'll have a phrase that will come and I'll write it down. It's not like the whole song comes together, but yeah. I mean, I think I have this sort of visual image of, like a lot of people say they keep a pad beside them when they're asleep. And I'm a bit too lazy to do that. And then I go, oh, I had this great line and I've forgotten it. And then I go, oh, well, it's come through me and now it's going to go to someone else because I didn't grab it on its way in, you know. I have this sort of sense of these gifts are flying around, you know. I don't know. I mean, I know there are other people who are amazingly disciplined about writing every day, but that's not me, you know.
So is it actually the lyrics or parts of the lyrics that come first? Or
they kind of come together. I mean, this one I'm talking about just now is just, the whole thing was just, I just started singing it. It was so weird. And I mean, the actual words are totally in line with my feeling about how to live a good life or how to be a good person or what's happening around me in the world. It's not like they're foreign words to me that come. It's a sort of, it's almost like there's an energy that synthesizes stuff and then says, okay, here you go. You know, I don't know. I can't explain it.
Well, the only thing one can do is be thankful for a gift.
Exactly.
And use it.
And share it. Yeah. Yes. Right. Actually, I'll just give you another anecdote of things that come to me that I had no idea why. So I one time this idea for an advertisement for Levi jeans for kids came to me. I mean, it was like, well, why are you giving me this? But I wrote it, what was it? It's to the tune of because it's for kids, right? It's for Knick Knack Paddywhack, Give a Dog a Bone. So that's the tune. And it was like, what is it? 501, 501, I just can't wait to get them on with a knick-knack paddywhack. Levi's got my jeans, something like that. You know, it was like, why are you doing this? You know, it's so weird. And another one was Bank of America is a huge corporate bank, right? And I don't particularly like corporate banks, but just one day I'm walking down the street and I'm to the tune of I Like to Be in America so it was I like the Bank of America, everyone Bank of America is like, I don't know why they come, but they come.
That's really great.
But it kind of illustrates the fact that I'm not sitting there trying to make that happen, you know.
You mentioned three kind of musical brethren, John Martyn and Michael Chapman and Kevin Ayers.
Yeah.
Since I'm such a fan of Kevin Ayers, is there something you can remember about your collaboration with him?
So these three guys, it's never been anything romantic, and because people always ask that. And I think that's why I was always so comfortable with them, because there wasn't that question. I mean, Kevin had beautiful women girlfriends, you know, and it was sort of nice to be his sister, do you know what I mean? And not even jealous or whatever, you know. None of those emotions came into our relationship, so I always felt very comfortable with them. But with Kevin, he's just such a kind person with me anyway, and when we recorded the oyster and the flying fish, and then we would do it live somewhere, and because there were no computers, each time he would handwrite out, and I kept to two of them, and I gave one to Galen, his daughter. I said, I think you ought to have one of these, you know, but it was always just this very relaxed, very easygoing creative process with him. And I thought our voices just always seemed like they should be together, you know. And I think he felt the same, I mean, you know, all those years later, in 2008, he wanted me to sing on his last album, and actually he got to New York, but he wasn't well, so I never met him. And he just told Tim Shepard, I think, was sort of managing him, and he said, well, Kevin wants you to sing on these songs and take the verse in this song. And so I went to the studio and did that, and I wrote him a long letter and sent him some herbal teas and stuff. But yeah, and then didn't see him again. But
I was lucky to interview Kevin Ayers in 92 when he was doing a tour over here. One part of the interview is still very present in my mind. For some reason I asked him, when did you realize that you're not an adolescent anymore? And he said, oh, I was lucky at 40.
Wow.
And I thought that was such a beautiful answer.
Yeah.
Because that's the way that's my impression of him, that he was very youthful and had a certain air about him.
But he was so beautiful. I mean, physically beautiful as well as inside. And yeah, I sang at his funeral and in 2013, was it? Yeah. So Galen, after he died, Galen got in touch with me and said, I'm going to be in New York. I'd love to meet you. So we got together, and that's when I gave her the lyrics. And then she said, I'm going to do a celebration of his life, and then burying the ashes in Dea in Mallorca. So I flew out for that, and it was really wonderful. Dea is very beautiful, and it wasn't too hot. It was just really lovely, sunny, and the whole funeral procession walked up through the village to where the crypt is, where he's buried, and next to Ollie Housel. And Gallant. And so we were singing, everybody singing a song in the morning. So it was just this lovely thing. And then at the gravesite, I sang May I, but I also sang it in French. I mixed the English and then the French. There was a guitar player there from, I think it's the band that Robert Frost's sons have out there, and it's just the guitar player and me. So yeah, it was very moving. And then we had a celebration of life on a stage in a venue, and that was fantastic too. And Galen called Mike Oldfield, who was in the Bahamas, and so their conversation was amplified so everyone could hear it. So he was included. It was really nice. And John Altman came, the sax player. Yeah.
I was really sad when I heard about
me too. I mean, I've looked at some of those videos on YouTube, because obviously I didn't see him for decades, and it was just like a bit of a shock to see physically what the ravages of alcohol do, you know. But his mind is still so wonderful to me anyway. Yeah. Yep.
Another one of your collaborators was Ron Geesin.
He was with the same agency that Kevin and I and Michael were with, which is Black Hill Enterprises. And so we would get sometimes booked on the same bill, even though musically we're miles apart. I mean, his whole creative process is just his own. It's completely unique, and sort of is really, really good banjo player, piano player, beautiful guitar player. I mean, he plays on Back to Stay, on Songs to the Gentleman. It's just beautiful. But his sort of his persona, I suppose, is very playful and random and completely unique. So that's how I knew him. Yeah. Know him. Sorry, I'm still in touch with him.
That's really great to hear, because I just been on his website and he seemed to be active still.
Well, he is. He too has arthritis, so he can't play his stringed instruments, but he can play piano still. Yeah. I think he said he's in the process of auctioning his guitars and banjos, because he was not playing them, so they should be played by somebody. So.
I'd like to move on to your change of locality when you moved to New York. The musical climate at the beginning was still open, as far as I gathered from your interviews, that you were able to be to play clubs in New York, but somehow this changed, and you also had to take care of your daughter. Can you go through the changes for us?
So when my first gig there was, I got stuck in Canada because of my visa problem, and in coming back, I had to get an H1, professional working permit. I had to have proof of gigs. So I knew John Martyn was I had met him in Canada actually when I was stuck there, and I knew he was coming for a tour in the States. So they put me on as his opening act at Kenny's Castaways as my first gig ever there. So that was really great, first of all, to be on the same bill with my friend, and then just to have a way back in, so, and then that became my musical home. I mean, I did other gigs obviously, but I did in those days you could play 3 nights in a row, 2 shows a night, and everyone made money. Do you know what I mean? So, but then that's 77. By 1980 that was all starting to change, and it was funny, I was listening to Nicky Ciano, the DJ, who really just gave me this amazing education into, like, disco started long before. I always said, well, it must have happened because disco came in, and no, disco started in the 1970. So it was like, wow, I'm going to buy the book that Richard King wrote. I think I need to really know more, but But for whatever reason, it started to change, and so this process of having, maybe a headliner and an opening act, so you'd only need 3 or 4 a week. You were having to do 4 people a night, just to get people in, and it just got harder to fill the clubs. I mean, so probably 1980 was when that started. Changing, whatever. And maybe it was just like, we don't want to hear singer-songwriters anymore, I'm not sure. But although Kenny's had amazing people there, that like Luther Allison, the guitar player, and Martin Bogan and Armstrong, who are from the South. Becky Curie was an amazing bass player from New Orleans who died very young. Doc Pomus used to hang out there all the time. We had this really good little kitchen there, and he loved the chicken and vegetable soup because it really was real made soup. But he came every night, not every night, every Monday night for sure, and then a couple of other nights, and he'd come in at 6 o'clock before the music started. And on Mondays we had audition night, right? So, and then all these very green, up and coming people would want Doc Pomus to say, so what did you think? And he goes, Bridget, I don't know what to say. I don't want to break their spirit, and yet it wasn't very good. So he said to me one day, he said, I tell them, your songs need a little more lateral movement. And it was just such a great phrase. I never forgot that he said that, because he's such a kind man. And everybody, I think, that's had any good experience with a career knows that it's so important to start somewhere. And when you start, you're not necessarily going to be that great, but you can only get better by doing, you know. So he was great. So I digressed, I think. Sorry.
No, that's wonderful. I remember reading that you also witnessed the Roaches, which is wonderful.
So you see, at the beginning, all these people, the Roaches already had a record deal. They'd already made their record with Paul Simon by the time I was there. But Steve Forbert played there and got a write-up. And the whole thing was to get a write-up in the New York Times, and then the record companies would come down and sign people. So he got signed. Willie Nile got signed. Carolyn Mars, who actually I think lives in Germany now, or did for a while. She came over here a long time ago. But who else? I mean, so many people. But the Roaches played there. Who else? Chris Smither, Paul Jeremiah. I'm trying to think. Steve Goodman, who also died young. He played there. I mean, it was an incredible place. It was. I really don't. I'm not good at overviews of why things happen or what the scene was like or anything. I just know it did just change, and then more bands came in. I mean, Pat Kenny had Kenny's Castaways uptown before it was downtown, and he was the first person to play Bruce Springsteen and Marshall Tucker Band up there, you know. And yeah, so he was always he had a very good ear for. I like this, a bit like Jan. I like this music, so I'm going to put it on. I'll find out about how to pay people. I mean, he always paid people, but it wasn't, the first thing wasn't, oh, I'm not going to make money off this, so I won't do it. It was like, I like this, so I'm going to do it. You know, it was a similar ethos, but every night he had to do that, not, you know, for a festival. But although Jan does so many things, yeah. So yeah, they would have gotten along, I think. Yeah.
And then you gave birth to your daughter.
So that was in 1983. Yeah, and I played pregnant. So by that time, Pat Kenny had gone into partnership with Dale Linden, Paul Colby at the Bitter End, which then by then had changed its name to the Other End, and now it's back to the Bitter End. But so they had the main room, and then they had the cafe, and I would play. I don't know, just probably an hour twice an evening sometimes. And so I was playing, so my daughter felt everything, which I'm grateful for. But by the time I gave birth 3 weeks later, I had a gig there, and my milk started coming in on stage, and I'm going like, I think I just wrote a bigger song than anything I can sing at the moment, you know. So that was a decision not to perform, not to create. And I wrote little kid songs for her, you know, and again they just sort of came. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to sit down and write you a song, you know. It's just yeah. So then I didn't actually probably perform for about 10 years then. Yeah.
But you did work.
Oh yeah, I worked in the clubs. Yeah, I mean, when I had that first gig at Kenny's, like 2 weeks later, I said to Pat Kenny, "Can I work here?" Because, I mean, that's what most people working there. He called himself Jesse Walden. Then he went back to his actual name, Bernie Shanahan. But he was the cook in the kitchen when I got there, and you know, there were waitresses who were musicians. It's just. It still is like that, I think. There's probably still musicians and actors that supplement their income. So I started off as a waitress, which I was really uncomfortable with. There's something about, I think you have to put yourself in another mind frame and be a waitress, perform a waitress, and I didn't really know how to do that. I didn't have skills of tray service or anything. And then I worked in as a bartender, which was much easier, although I had to learn all the drinks, but that wasn't so hard back then. Now it would be impossible. There's all these designer drinks you have, and then you have to create your own, but then it was, you know, a pretty standard group of drinks. And then I worked in the kitchen, and then I sort of went over to sort of the management side of things, and checking out in the morning and all that, and ordering stuff, you know, and still play. Well, at the beginning, still playing, and so I kept doing that after she was born. I could still do that.
Somewhere I read that you also work as a nurse taking care of the elderly?
No, so I am not a nurse. So I worked with I call them my elders and wisers, but it was always, I mean, I'm finding this, as you get older, you get a little more disorganized. I'm very tangential, and I'm kind of like ADD, it's like if this is my room, I'm going like, oh, I need to straighten that up. And then I'll go, oh, no, I want to play piano. Oh, the couch needs straightening. I'll see everything that needs doing and start one thing and then see the next and go. So I think as you get older, it's nice to have someone help organize you. And so the first job I did actually was, so when I stopped working at Kenny's in 1990, the first job I did was cleaning houses for a year. A friend of mine was a real estate agent. She said, Bridget, these people need cleaners. So I would do that, and I liked it because I did a good job, and then I didn't have to think about that place anymore. Whereas when I had worked at the club, it was like, oh, I didn't do this paperwork, I'll have to get up or take it home or whatever. It was just really nice to just become more of me, and then after a year that got, okay, I'm done doing this. And so my friend Mary actually said that there was this woman that needed her basement organizing. So I did a really good job. She said, oh my goodness, this is incredible. She said, I have a friend who's very depressed and she doesn't get her paperwork done. So I went and met with her, and then I worked with her. And then she said, I have a friend who lives uptown. And I said, oh, I don't go above 14th Street because I walked everywhere, She said, well, would you call her? So I did. And then I agreed to take the subway, and her name was Frida. And so I worked with her. And by the end of, she ended up moving to Michigan. But when sort of towards the end, it was like I would get there and I would know the first thing she would say, well, Bridget, I'm looking for my checkbook. I can't find my dark glasses, and I want to do this. So those are the first things. And, it was just, but I'm not a nurse. So, yes. I might have gone to doctor's appointments with them, but whatever they needed me to do, I did, but not medical.
Your albums got re-released by The Beat Goes On and
C for Miles.
Yeah. And younger people started connecting with your music. Can you tell us a bit how you experienced this?
First of all, I didn't know they were being released, I had no idea. I had nothing to do with... In fact, if I had something, I would ask them to separate the first two albums they put as one album. And it was like, why did you do that? Because for money, I'm sure. But anyway, I had nothing to do with it. So I was really, really surprised. In fact, in 95, or not probably, perhaps 94, I met with John Tobler from Road Goes On Forever, who ended up putting out my fifth album. And I said, I have some music. And he told me after, I was a bit skeptical, but so I brought him cassette tapes of different things I had. And he said, oh, wow, this is really good. I'll do it. And that he was the one, I think, that told me, C for Miles has put out your first three records. And I went, really? I had nobody told me, nobody. So anyway, that's the music business. They don't have to tell you. So... but I think it's probably in the early 2000s that younger people started coming to gigs, and I was like, wow, they know my music, So, but it's something that I feel, for my awareness of it anyway, is just built up, and now I'm just really grateful. It's like I don't think there is an age limit for my music, whereas there was definitely a period when it was like I felt it would only be people that knew me already who would come to my gigs, And now it's not like that.
I noticed that Devandra Banhart is a fan and probably friend of yours, and Steve Gunn. How did these people approach you?
I met Devandra in 2004 at the Minneapolis festival. Who was that run by? I think you say it Destijl, Destijl festival. Anyway, and he reminded me of early Mark Bolan sitting cross-legged on the floor. I was like, wow, this is not musically, but just in sort of approach to how to sit and perform. But And I was really captivated by him. And then he was the one that approached me and just said, I really love your music. I'd like to give you some of mine. And he gave me this CD, and I played it, and I fell in love with The Body Breaks. And so I was on this little tour with Espers, and so I learned that, or I learned my version. I interpreted that song, and I played it when I got to New York at Tonic, and Devandra was there. I didn't know that. And he left after I had finished, and then wrote me this beautiful long letter, and it was like, he was just so touched, I guess, that I'd done his song. But I think he's really very special writer. Yeah. So that was Devandra. And Steve, I didn't really know his music, but he produced Chapman's last 2 albums. And Michael came over to New York for the first of those, the 50 album. And we went up, he said, come up to the studio. And Steve was producing that. And that's really where I started to get to know him. And then we did the second album in Wales. And by then I'd sort of had, I'm trying to think, so that was 2018, I think we did True North. I don't think we'd actually played together, but anyway, I got to know him more, and then we did, he asked me to sing on Morning River, and then he did an alternate version where I did the lead vocal, and he put that on another. I mean, he's very prolific and somehow organized enough to get everything he writes out onto vinyl. So yeah, and then we've done some live gigs together, which is, it's funny. Where was I first playing with him? Well, it wasn't the first time, but we did a festival, Woodist festival in New York State, and it was just after COVID when everyone felt safe to come out, at least outside. And I remember staying on stage when Steve was playing with me. I said, I feel like I have John Martyn beside me, because it was the comfort. I mean, obviously it was at the beginning of John's career and my career that we played together, but it was this very comfortable feeling of somebody who just is in tune with me, And I think in terms of our natures, we're very compatible. Yeah.
Back to the present, I'd like to ask you about new songs that you may have recorded but you didn't put out as a record. I remember from last night's set, Hole in the Heart, right, which was inspired by the 9/11 catastrophe, and you also played a song, something with Papillon in it.
Mon Gala Papillon. Yeah. I have recorded The Hole in Your Heart. I did it soon after 9/11, maybe a year later. And when Cherry Red said they were putting together a compilation of my favorite songs, and I went like, well, I think they can put this song on. But I didn't sort of realize that in saying that, I mean, we never signed a contract. And then when we were signing contracts, I said, but I didn't give you that song. He said, but we're putting it out. And I said, but I didn't sign anything. So, I mean, it was amicable. It was a conversation. But so it is on, that's all it is, though, on a compilation. So, and at this point, I sing it differently. I think I'd like to re-record it. And I would like to use the version that I have now, which is How Do We Mend the Hole in the Heart. So I want to redo that for sure. And they have the publishing, that's fine. It's because the one thing I have to say is that they're very regular in paying me properly, and I have I kind of like the idea of the pre-recorded work all being on one label, because then it's easier for me to sort of not have different invoices coming in and out, or what. And when I'm not here, Christy won't have such a hard time tracking things down. So I want to do that. I want to do Mon Gala Papillon. I've rewritten America the Beautiful, and I want to record that. I want to do Look at This Child. I probably have, and there's some songs that, there's one called Point of No Return. I have a live recording of it, but that's it, and it's really not a good recording, so I wouldn't put that out. But I'd like to record that. So, Yeah, when I actually on Friday, this coming Friday when I get back, I'm going to get together with actually my husband's musical director, guitarist, who I've played with, and just start, putting demos down and figuring out how I want them to be. I did do Michael Chapman's Aviator during the pandemic. Andrew asked a whole group of us to take one of Michael's songs and record it, so I chose Aviator, and that came out amazingly well. And Nigel Cross, who runs Shagrat Records in England, is going to do an EP, and I said I've always wanted to do I said an album, but an EP's fine, of Under My Brother's covers. So in other words, I'm covering my brother's song. So I've got that Michael Chapman song. I'm going to have Jolie Madame. I mean, I don't know how this recording will come out, but there's another one of me with a keyboard player that I did, which we'll see. Or I can just record it again. I'll see. But I want to do that. And interestingly enough, this year, Vari, John Martyn's daughter, got in touch with me and said that she was going through reel-to-reels that were with John when he was alive, and that this one wasn't labeled, and she put it on, and he said, "Oh yeah, that's Bridget." And she said, I just took down the titles, and I'm giving you the tape. So I have the tape, and I'm in London, and Nigel Cross said, I'd love to get together with you. And he came out to Reading, where my sister lives, and we just were talking, and I said, I have this tape, and I can't listen to it. I don't have a Revox anymore. And I said that John had said it's me, and I said the titles that she had written down, and one of them is Head and Heart. And so he has a friend, Tony Poole, who has a band. He's a really great musician, but a really good technician. And he said, well, why don't you give me the tape now? And he came back to the house to get it, and then I'll have him work on it. So he did. And the version of Head and Heart is like, it must have been my demo for Jumble Queen. All these songs are just me with The Watered and Widow, Song for the Watered and Widow, Head and Heart. There's another song that I didn't even remember I wrote on there, but it's kind of random. But anyway, but this version of Head and Heart, I just love it. It's just me and 12-string. And so that's going to go on there. And then I did cover of my interpretation of Nick Drake's Fly for Mojo magazine, but that was years ago, and after 18 months the rights go back to me because I paid for it, so that will be on it. So I'll have actually 4 brothers on there. It's going to be vinyl. And then I found this, I was just going through stuff at home, and I found this really fantastic recording of me with Michael Chapman, and he's playing guitar with me playing Lazarus, but it's so this wonderful bluesy thing he's doing, So Nigel said, well, why don't we'll do Under Your Brother's covers, and then have that as a digital download for people who buy the EP. So I'm fine with that. And it's kind of like, well, here's me and my brother. So.
And there's one thing I'd like to ask you at the end of the interview. You referred to your philosophy of life during the concert.
Oh, right.
Can you repeat what you said, or maybe elaborate on it?
Oh, okay. So I said that in the context of sort of the inspiration for Mon Gala Papillon was, the title came from Gail O'Hara, but really the title of the festival had nothing to do with the inspiration for the song. And I was listening to the radio to this interview with a homeless man who they were amazed how joyful and happy he was. And he said, si je mange, if I eat, si je danse, if I dance, je suis heureux, I'm happy. And I said, which kind of aligns with my philosophy, or some of my philosophy in life. And I didn't mean literally that if I eat and if I dance, I'm fine. But at the same token, the song says, if I sing and if you dance, this is perfect harmony. And I think in terms of my philosophy, it's about getting along with people, and being open to the possibility of a generous connection. I think that's how I would say it. But his think. I mean, I cannot imagine a homeless person actually being that amazing, because I see homeless people all the time, and it's desperate, you know. And for him to have that outlook was incredible to me. And I've always been an optimist, you know. I mean, there are times when you, like with this upcoming election, where you go, I don't know what's going to happen, but I don't carry that sort of feeling with me all the time, you know. I try to just see the best in people. And I mean, I know, you know, in talking about John Martyn, my relationship with him was always a good and kind one. And I know a lot of people, I mean, I've seen some of the things people have written. It's like, it's almost that culture of wanting to find something out so they can put people down. I never had that experience with him personally, and so I can't go along with that, you know. I have to go with we were good to each other, do you know what I mean? So yeah, does that explain it?
I'd like to thank you very much for taking time to talk to me.
Thank
and
you.
To our listeners, and it's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.